Welcome to your weekly Open the Door to Tai Chi lesson. We all know that the benefits of Tai Chi come from applying the underlying principles. And we're in the middle of a series now of applying those principles to the 24 form. And we've done lessons in the past of improving individual movements, but now I want to take it to the next step of improving segments of the form. So we're going to split the 24 form into 3 parts. We've done the first section where we ended with repulse the monkey. Now we're going to move on to the middle section, and we're going to go from the ward off sequence to the left kick. So we're going to do that, and we're going to do that segment several times, and each time we're going to try to separate out each of the underlying principles as we do it. Okay, so let's start with the ward-off sequence. And unlike last week where with Repulse the Monkey we got back to our place where we started, this time it's not so simple. We're going to end up over there. We're just going to have to walk back over here each time. But that's okay. The purpose is to think about how this principle helps with this particular segment of the form. So we're going to start holding the ball, and the first principle we're going to think about is columns. So we step out, ward off, grasp the bird's tail. Now stop right there for a second. Think about how keeping your shoulders in harmony with your hips actually makes it so that you don't overreach and grasp the bird's tail. If you're thinking about your columns, you're making this movement stay within your columns. Now it's a grasp the bird's tail like this. So let's start again. Holding that ball, ward off, grasp the bird's tail, roll back, rotate and press. Now think about those columns, think about shoulders in harmony with your hips as you do this pushing chi. Then bringing your weight to the right, back to the left, and ward off. Grasp the bird's tail. Roll back, rotate and press, pushing chi. Bringing your weight to the left, back to the right, forming a bird's beak, and single whip. Stop with your single whip for just a second. Think about shoulders in harmony with your hips. This one is very easy to want to move like this. You settle into your single whip, keeping your columns intact. Wave hands like clouds. One more. Settling into that single whip again. Good. Then high pat on horse, stepping forward, kick, smash, and box the ears. Think about keeping those columns intact and lowering your center of gravity, not reaching forward, breaking your columns. Think about as you smash and then box the ears, you're moving from that dantian to keep those columns intact. Turning and kick left. So now we go back to the beginning. Well, not the beginning, the middle, the beginning of the middle. And now I want you to think about rotation. Stepping out, rotating into your grasp the bird's tail. Roll back. Obviously, this is a lot of rotation. Rotate and press. Pushing chi. Bringing your weight over to the right, back to the left, and rotating. Grasp the bird's tail. Roll back, rotate and press. pushing chi. Rotating into that single whip, and remember there's a rotation here to finish out your single whip. Wave hands like clouds. Clearly with this rotation, we're bringing that center of mass over our base of support. The rotation helps us relax in this motion because it's really the movement of the rotation that's moving our arms. High pat on horse. Kick, smash, and box the ears. And then turning, it's a big rotation, kick, left. Small note with your kick, smash, and box the ears. You're oriented in this direction, straight on as you start your kick, smash, and box the ears. Your torso is facing this direction. But remember, there's a small rotation in that when you kick, you're kicking on the diagonal and you land on that diagonal. So think about that little bit of rotation with your kick, smash, and box the ears. So now let's do moving from the dantian. Taking a nice deep breath in. Let that dantian lead that rotation as you ward off and grasp the bird's tail. Then lead as you roll back. And you should feel that your arms just kind of follow what the dantian says. Pushing chi, pulling back and pushing forward from the dantian. Holding that ball to the left, ward off. Grasp the bird's tail. Roll back. Rotate and press. Really focus on your dantian right now. Focus on that middle part of your body leading this motion. Coming into your single whip. Wave hands like clouds. Like I just said with that rotation, your dantian comes over that substantial leg. It's your center of mass coming over your base of support. Helping your body relax as you do this movement. Forming a bird's beak and single whip. High pat on horse. Kick, smash, and box the ears. Now think about lifting that leg from your dantian. Kick, smash, and moving forward. Remember, you're lowering that center of gravity, moving forward from the dantian to box the ears. As you turn, again, think about lifting from the dantian to kick. It's a different way to think about kicking, but if you think about lifting from here, from that middle part of your body, that actually helps with that lift. So now we're going to think about substantial and insubstantial. Really distinguishing between the two. Stepping out, ward off. Grasp the bird's tail. Now think about it. You're not moving, but that weight has to shift in this whole ward off sequence. You have to distinguish your substantial and your insubstantial. Bringing your weight over to the right, back to the left, and now think about that weight has to come forward onto the right. Now the weight comes back onto the left. Weight comes forward onto the right. Weight comes back, and then it goes forward. Bringing your weight to the left, then back to the right, forming that bird's beak and settling into your single whip. Now as you do your wave hands like clouds, Remember that right leg has to be completely insubstantial to let it move. And now the left has to be completely insubstantial. Very important to distinguish as you move through your wave hands like clouds, forming a bird's beak and single whip. High pat on horse, letting that left leg step forward. Now fill that left leg completely substantial, right leg insubstantial, kick, smash, and box the ears. Turning, left leg is completely insubstantial, kick. So now we're going to do rooted and grounded and thinking about that energy from the ground. Remember, all of these principles start to meld together, but I want you to try to separate it out now as we do this section of the form over and over. So think about being rooted and grounded, feel your feet, lower your center of gravity just a little bit. Step out, ward off. And remember, rooted and grounded means you also are stable in your stance. So take a minute here to look at your stance as you step out with your ward off. Make sure you're not stepping too narrow so that you're unstable. Remember, you have to step a little bit behind, ward off. Grasp the bird's tail. Roll back. Rotate and press. Pushing chi. Bringing your weight over to the right, back to the left, and ward off. Feel that ground. Lower your center of gravity just a touch. Roll back. Rotate and press. Pushing chi. Bringing your weight over to the left, back to the right, forming a bird's beak, and single whip. Wave hands like clouds. Remember that your feet are fully connected but not glued. They're fluid, using that energy from the ground. Single whip. High pat on horse. Kick, smash, and box the ears. Turning, kicking left. I want to take a second to talk about those last few moves with being rooted and grounded, because being rooted and grounded also covers understanding and knowing the intent and purpose of those movements. So we don't talk about high pat on horse very much. We come from that single whip position and we just kind of float through this high pat on horse. But if you understand the intent and purpose of it, it will make it a more purposeful move for you. Think about what you're doing here. You come into this movement and you step forward and move your hands in such a way that you're utilizing that energy, right? We'll talk about energy flow next, but this move is very similar to what move? Repulse the monkey. You're stepping into your opponent with high pat on horse. You're stepping away from your opponent with repulse the monkey. If you understand that sometimes the strategy is good to get away from your enemy, but sometimes the strategy is good to move in and crowd so you actually have the advantage there. That's what you're doing with your high pat on horse. Obviously with kick, smash, and box the ears and kicking, that's very clear what the intent and purpose is with those movements. But that's part of being rooted and grounded, is understanding that. So now let's move on and let's do energy flow and continuous movement. It's very easy to think about that continuous movement with our ward-off sequence because that's how we learn it. But we need to think about how is that happening and how do we translate that to the rest of the form. So holding that ball of energy. Remember, we make that ball small. What are we doing with this energy? Grasp the bird's tail. And then yielding as we roll back, as we rotate and press into our opponent, and then pushing chi, pulling down and pressing into upwards. Holding that ball, feeling that energy flowing just as the movement is flowing. Pushing chi, coming into that single whip. And then wave hands like clouds, thinking about this big ball of energy we have in front, but not just that imaginary ball that we're manipulating outside of our body, but the energy that's flowing in because we're open. We're allowing that energy, there's no constriction, we're allowing it to flow. High pat on horse. Think about here, there's a ball of energy that's right at where you need it to put into your opponent. And then using that energy to lift, kick, smash, and box the ears. Turning and kick. So now one last principle by itself, breathing. You want to breathe in as you gather, breathing out as you ward off and grasp the bird's tail. Breathing in, breathing out as you rotate and press. Breathing in, coming towards your body, and breathing out. As you're gathering, you're breathing in and breathing out. Remember, you do this at your own pace. Thinking about long, slow, calm breaths, uniform breaths. Coming into your single whip. With wave hands like clouds, you can breathe in, going one direction. You can breathe out, going the other. Or you can challenge yourself and breathe in and on both directions and then breathing out, going both directions. Single whip, high pat on horse, kick, smash, and box the ears. You're breathing in as you gather and then breathing out as you approach that enemy. Breathing in as you gather and then using that energy, breathing out as you kick. We're going to do that segment one more time. And now is when I want you to think about how they all interplay together. All of these principles, they're really truly not separate things. They help each other. They integrate to help give you the benefits of Tai Chi. So again, thinking about breathing in, but now moving from the dantian as you rotate, staying within your columns, being rooted and grounded, knowing where that energy is flowing and how you're using it against your opponent. Bringing your weight over to the right, back to the left, ward off, grasp the bird's tail, roll back, rotate and press, pushing chi. Bringing your weight over to the left, back to the right, forming a bird's beak, and single whip. Wave hands like clouds. One more. Forming a bird's beak and single whip. High pat on horse. Kick, smash, and box the ears. Turning, kicking left. So now I want you to take this week to just practice that middle part of the form. Yes, it feels a little weird, but to not start at the beginning and not finish, right? However, if you can really work on that middle part of the form, the whole form will start to feel much better, and you'll start to get more of the benefits of Tai Chi. So just take that middle part this week, and then next week we'll finish up with the end. I'll see you then.